Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Bolden Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you after week 5 of the 2024 NFL season. And let's just say the NFL will never not continue to surprise us. Some big news emerging today, which of course we shall be diving into in the very first topic of the show. Yeah, just a brilliant week of football as well. Some of it weather marred by the weather. For those of us who were on the Eastern time zone, having to sit up through past midnight to watch the end of the Dallas Cowboys Pittsburgh Steelers game. As I said on Twitter, the people I feel most sorry for are the international fans during those situations, because I can only really think of myself, because that would be normally would be a 1:30 in the morning start in the UK for us guys, and then 2:30 in the morning on on continental Europe. But for that game to start at the time it did, that game finishes at 6 o'clock in the morning UK time, 7 o'clock Central European time. So kudos to anyone, I think, in any time zone who stuck that out. Well, I'd say Eastern onwards. I mean, I'm not counting Central, Mountain, and Pacific. You guys got it easy, for once. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about what has gone on in and around the National Football League this week. And before I do that, though, I need to start off by doing the admin as I usually do. And that is as simple as saying thank you very much once again for joining us on this little adventure that we have going here. Don't forget, if you are new, welcome along. And don't forget, you can like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. And don't forget that you can like and subscribe to us on Twitter. We are at MRB Sports Media on that. And then on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, we are at Baldwin Sports Media. So don't forget to check those out as well. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for making me a part of your week. I see the numbers, as I say, continue to grow week on week. Very good to see. So very good to see there are some returning people coming into the fold, and it's always great to have you in. Right. With that being said, it's time for us to kick off with the show. And there are no guesses, or no surprises rather, for guessing where we are going to start off the news today. And that is the news that Robert Saleh, the head coach of the New York Jets, was fired from his position, coming back from London, losing to the Minnesota Vikings, dropping to a 2-3 record. The New York Jets say, fine, that's enough from what we've seen. Now, am I surprised that Robert Saleh was fired? To an extent, no, because I did feel that he was on the hot seat. I've said a couple of previous times that he was basically given everything he wanted. If you wanted to say he didn't have the quarterback play because he had Zach Wilson, someone who he did not draft but was effectively handed, if you want to say it was down to that, fine. The defense was always pretty good under him, bringing him over from his 49ers days. The defensive side of the ball's always been good, but the quarterback play wasn't there. So we get you Aaron Rodgers. Okay, he injured himself, first game of last season. Unexpected circumstances, what can you do? And kept them reasonably competitive given the circumstances. And also making the changes to quarterback in order to help keep that team somewhat competitive. So if you want to say that, fine. Aaron Rodgers comes in, looks okay, not quite the Aaron Rodgers of MVP seasons gone by, but looks to be okay. So you can't really use the excuse of Aaron Rodgers is playing poorly. You can't use that excuse. So as a result, when you are, you do have a losing record, then you are going to be on the hot seat. I thought they would at least let him stick out the year personally, because at 2-3, and with the next couple of games that they've got the Buffalo Bills, which, if everything goes right for them, they could very well win that game. And then they've got the Pittsburgh Steelers coming up, who are a bit of an out of shape team, not exactly perfect. So they could go 4-3, and then all of a sudden things are looking up for them. So a bit surprised to see him fired this early on. If they'd have played like this, and the numbers had stayed roughly the same throughout the end of the season, and they finished with another 7-10, 9-8 record, 8-9 record, then yeah, I probably could have said, yeah, I deserved to be fired, because again, you got everything that you wanted out of this, but you still couldn't make it work. So we'll see him at the end of the season. But to fire him right now, I just don't think that was the right move. But the thing that is going to come out of all of this is obviously the power struggle that is going on at the top of the organization. Where does the power really lie? How much does Aaron Rodgers have a say over this? Should they maybe have fired Nathaniel Hackett instead? There's just the generic chaos that always surrounds or seems to surround the New York Jets as an organization, rearing its ugly head once again. And this could only really end in disaster for them. I don't see this as something that is going to provide that big jump in terms of they it's the phrase in soccer is a new manager bounce. When things can't be any worse, so just if results just seem to improve, but it's always down to the new manager because the players are finally free from the disastrous play that was under the previous manager slash head coach. So now things are going to be a little bit better. The players are playing a little more freely. Even if there is that new head coach bounce with Jeff Ulbrich, who is the interim head coach for the Jets, was the defensive coordinator under Robert Saleh. Whether or not he may gets them through the next couple of games, I just don't see this as something that is going to work in the long run for the New York Jets. I feel Robert Saleh should have at least had the chance to finish out the season, but the New York Jets as an organization have tied themselves to Aaron Rodgers, and it's a lot. It appeared to be a lot easier to get rid of the head coach than it is the quarterback, the star, face the franchise quarterback. So off the head coach goes. What I will say though is I think for Robert Saleh, I think he's now sort of put himself in that position where I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job just yet. I think he's going to go back to being a defensive coordinator, and whoever gets him are going to get themselves one fantastic defensive coordinator. We've seen this in a couple of places. There are some coaches who are just built to be coordinators, and when they take that next step into being a head coach, they just can't handle it because as a defensive coordinator, it's just one side. One side of the ball. How many players on the roster? 53 plus the press squad. No, so what? 30ish guys you've got to take control of, as opposed to being the head coach where you got to take charge of every single one of them and the practice squad and have to do the media and have to have contact with the GM to decide what players you want and be the face of everything on game. So there are just some coordinators who are built to be coordinators and not meant to be head coaches. And one thing that you can always say from Robert Saleh from his time with the Jets is that, his defenses have always been very, very good. So now imagine what he's going to be able to do when he gets into a new job and he's only focusing on the defense and not having to deal with all the other nonsense going on that's happening on the other side of the ball. So whoever gets him is going to be in a very, very good position. I will say that much. But as I say, for the Jets as a whole, total disaster. But what do you expect? It's the New York Jets. So I don't really feel any sympathy for them, whatever happens. At the end of the season, they should have at least had Robert Saleh stick around until the end of the year. To get rid of him now, I just don't see it. And with that, we move to our next topic now. So the first bit was about someone who is done, officially done, in Robert Saleh. Now for the second one, no real big talking point I want to talk about. There is one in the next segment, which I'll go into in slightly less detail, but this is one I really want to focus on. So last week I sort of focused on who the coaches were, who I thought were on the hot seat now that we were a quarter way through the season. And now moving on a week, I want to talk about the teams that I think are pretty much done in my eyes. Now, again, this isn't necessarily just the teams with the worst records. We've seen it, we've seen it countless times. There are teams that can kick into gear and get things sorted out. Maybe, like the Dolphins, you may think they're struggling, but when they get to a Tagovailoa back, things will get better. So the record isn't necessarily a fair reflection of where they are. And, in the same way, teams that are 5-0, who knows if they're going to continue to be undefeated or if they're going to, a bit like the Eagles last year, have that massive collapse towards the end of the year. So just because you have a good or a bad record does not mean you're going to finish you're going to finish well or you're going to finish badly. But after 5 weeks, I think we can roughly tell where some teams are going. And again, miracles can happen, things can change. But as things stand now, I think we can pretty much put a couple of teams. Who do I have down here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 teams that I think we can start moving towards the number one pick category. So things are going to hit, and then they're going to tank and see what happens. Again, maybe not tank, but I don't think they're going to be contending very strongly, and I think are going to be closer towards the bottom than the top, shall we say. So, with that said, how I did this was I literally just went around the conferences, same way I did with the predictions and start of the year. AFC, North, South, East, West, NFC, North, South, East, West, and then just came up with who I think are pretty much done for the year. So, with that said, let's get on with it. And I think the first one is going to be the Cleveland Browns, just because of what is happening with Deshaun Watson, which again we will touch on. We will touch on in a second, but I think the quarterback play is not going to get exponentially better to get them competing. And I think with the situation surrounding the Browns, I think they are better off just dumping Deshaun Watson, going for a high pick, and maybe trying to figure things out somewhere, especially because with the dead cap hit that they're going to get, they're going to have to find a cheaper quarterback to try and make things work, whether that be, someone out of college, whether that be the Shador Sanders or Cam Ward from Miami, or Quinn Ewers from Texas, or whoever, Jalen Milroe rather from Alabama, whoever it may be. I think that is going to be their next move. They are going to have to start over again at quarterback, and with this being the Browns, it's going to be in spectacular fashion. So just sit back and enjoy the show there. After that, I've got the Jaguars. Slightly looking better, but I did put Doug Peterson on the hot seat with the Jaguars, and I just think the way they are sort of trending, I don't see them being able to get out of it and go on a continued run. They can pick up a win here and there, but I don't see them rattling off 3, 4 wins in a row to get even back into contention within the AFC South. So I think they're pretty much done as an entity for this season, and as a result, I do think that means Doug Peterson goes as well. Next up, I've gone for the New England Patriots. Again, bit of news that I'll tug it into this. The news coming out today that Drake Maye is going to be their starter. They've obviously waited for him to develop, feel right. This is the right time to put him in. Let's go for it. I do think that is a move that I think is done with the idea, maybe that let's just throw him out there. He won't be the finished product, but what do we have to lose after the start of the season that we've had? We're not going to be competing. This is a rebuild project. And this is just we'll see what we've got for the future. So I think the New England Patriots are done for the year, and they are a team that I think could very well be in that mix for that number one pick. Someone like Travis Hunter, maybe, the star two-way player out of Colorado. I think he's going to be someone that they will look to capture if they believe that Drake Maye is their quarterback. Moving on, I think the Las Vegas Raiders, I think are going to be, I think consider them done as well. The Devontae Adams situation, which again we'll touch on later. If they were competing, I don't think he'd be in the mood he is in now. And I think with Devontae Adams set to leave, that just takes away their main offensive threat. So, you know, put a fork in them, they're done. I think that's the phrase you can best associate with the Raiders. The Carolina Panthers I've put down there as well. Moving over to the NFC, pretty obvious dumpster fire of a franchise. Need I say more about them? And then the final one, I've gone for the Los Angeles Rams. Whilst I did say that it's not necessarily the Chevy record, but I do think 1-4 with the players that they have injured. Again, similar to Jaguars, I don't see them rattling off 3, 4, 5 wins in a row to get back. So that's probably where they're going to end up. And again, Los Angeles Rams, a franchise that could do with a little bit of help on both sides of the ball. So Travis Hunter would be for them. Maybe they do decide to go for the star quarterback, depending on what Matthew Stafford is looking like he's going to do. So, yeah, I think the Los Angeles Rams are the other ones in there as well. But don't forget, let me know what you think on, are these the teams that you think are done? Do you think there should be, do you disagree with one of them? Do you think that there should be another team that should be in there instead? Let me know. So don't forget to reach out at Baldwin Sports Media on TikTok, YouTube and Instagram, and at MRB Sports Media on Twitter for that conversation. And with that out of the way, we move on to the quick roundup from around the league. And where do we start? The Devontae Adams situation, as I just touched on. As I said, I think if the Raiders were a competitive force, which I think many people may have had them as a dark horse to be this year, I don't think he's as in a mood to request a trade than he is. But this does seem like a waving the white flag for the Las Vegas Raiders for them to come out and say, right, we are going to listen to offers for him. What have you got? Now, I'm not going to touch much on where I think he's going to go because we've sort of delved into that in the past couple of weeks. I've said that there were some suggestions that I didn't quite buy. Like, I didn't buy the Kansas City Chiefs interest because I just felt like there was no way they were going to trade him within the division. Then you look at the Saints and the Jets were the two front runners because of his relationships with the quarterbacks, which was seemed obvious. But as things stand, just reading an article from the Athletic here, just double checking. The Jets, the Saints, and the Steelers are among the teams who remain interested. The Bills and the Chiefs are monitoring the situation. The Dallas Cowboys apparently passed. They don't want to pay his salary. And then the last one, and I think in terms of cryptic clues that have been placed around the NFL in recent years, I do think this was the accidental best. The way Devonta Adams on Instagram posted a picture of Edgar Allan Poe, whose most famous work is The Raven. I do think that was, again, either he's done that deliberately because he wants to play for the Ravens, which is, a great way to say it, or he's done it deliberately and he's just putting it out there for the sake of doing it, in which case it is an absolutely brilliant troll. I think bringing up classical poets, there are various ways that you can do it. To bring up a classical poet to just throw out into the ether, I think is absolutely fantastic. But by the sounds of it, the Las Vegas Raiders aren't in a rush to get this deal done, which again sort of leans into what I was saying earlier about them being done for the season because they don't seem to be as desperate to get, the talk is they want a second round pick plus additional compensation. If they felt they could be in with a chance right now, then they want that additional compensation, whatever it is, they'd want that right now. But the fact that they're playing it coy makes me think that this is a move for the future. And again, they're not being too quick with it. But yes, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. Again, opinions sort of change every week. If you had to put a gun to my head now, where I think he is going to go, I think it's going to be the Ravens. I just think there is something about, wanting to join the best team, and the Ravens can be the best team. And you think another weapon to add to that offensive arsenal, really, I say it's the opposite, but who stops that offense? With Derrick Henry, with Lamar Jackson, with Zay Flowers, with Nelson Aguilar, who I think is a very, very underrated wide receiver, Rashad Bateman, and then you add Devontae Adams into the mix, and they're really what defense rather stops that powerful offense from doing anything. So I think when push comes to shove, I think the Ravens are going to be the most aggressive because they want to have that final piece to, not necessarily final piece, but that extra piece to their team. So I think I think they're going to push and they're going to be very, very aggressive and be the ones to get him. That does bring me, I was going to touch on this later, but I'll bring it up anyway. Very good to see Derrick Henry finally molding in to the Baltimore Ravens. It took him a while to get going, but if you look at what he's done over the past 3 weeks, started with the game against the Cowboys, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns. Against Buffalo, 199 yards and a touchdown. And this weekend, this is just rushing, by the way. This isn't including his receiving totals. 92 yards and another touchdown. So good to see him finally, being back to the Derrick Henry that we knew he could be, and that is exactly what is making the Baltimore Ravens, as I said, arguably the best offense and the best all-round team in the National Football League right now. And with that, we go on to the final subject, and it is something I've sort of touched on before, but I just think, again, after seeing it this weekend, I think we need to have the conversation about what is going to happen with Deshaun Watson and the Cleveland Browns, because it just continues to not, even because I'm sure you may have seen the clip of what appeared to be him quitting on his teammates and appearing to give up on a play. I believe it was a fourth down when they were trailing, heavily. It's since come out that it was just he wanted to take the delay of game penalty rather than the timeout because there was 12 men in the huddle. There were various ways around it, but even so, just on the surface, it just doesn't look good that this is the product that you are putting out, and these are the numbers that you are putting out. Again, if there was any sort of upward momentum to say that Deshaun Watson is finally, even after however many years and games he's played with the Cleveland Browns, that things were getting better, then yeah, fine. You might want to look into that. I mean, like last week against the Raiders, say he completed 75% of his passes. Okay, fine. That's something in the right direction. But you go again this week, he completed 53.6% of his passes, averaged 4.5 yards per attempt, which is his second lowest of the season, and was sacked 7 times, which again was his second lowest of the season, putting up a rating of 77.2, which was again his second lowest of the season. Whichever way you look at it, he's just not getting better. And then even images like that, again, the optics of it matter a lot in sports. And if that is gonna turn a bunch of fans away. This is a Cleveland Browns franchise that looked as if they'd finally got their bleep together after all these years. Finally, making it into the playoffs last year. They looked as if they were finally turning things around behind, a great defense and defensive player of the year, but not in my eyes, Myles Garrett, and a quality defense, across the board. But this just isn't working out for them. And as the weeks go on, you have to wonder what their options are going to be, because what do you do if you are the Cleveland Browns? I mean, do you just cut him and just eat your losses, or do you ride this out continuously? I mean, do you think Jameis? It really does depend on what they want this season to be. I mean, do they think they can still win? Okay, put Jameis Winston in. He may not be perfect, but he's still a hell of a lot better than what Deshaun Watson is giving you. Or do you want to maybe start looking towards the future then? Who's, Dorian Thompson Robinson? I nearly butchered his name there. Go and throw him in. Maybe he's the guy that's going to. Whatever way you look at it, it is just not working with Deshaun Watson. And again, whatever's happening off the field, maybe that is what they're doing. Maybe they are holding on to him just so that if all the stuff that comes out off the field gives them just cause to just boot his contract and get rid of him and cut and get. Maybe that's the only reason they're holding on to him. But you can hold on to him and not play him and still, give your team a chance. But it's just not happening with Deshaun Watson. I think that's pretty obvious. And at the same time, I could not be happier that it's happening to a more dysfunctional franchise than the Cleveland Browns. And quite frankly, I don't know what they did to tick off whoever it is they ticked off as a franchise. But going back, losing the team and then losing the team as the Browns, seeing them turn into the Ravens, then having to see them win 2 Super Bowls and be one of the best run organizations in sport, and they just being a continual dumpster fire, the 1-31 record. Just, I don't know what they did to tick someone off, and then now they've got this. But as someone who's in the AFC North, I could not be more delighted to see it happen to any other franchise. Just absolutely ecstatic. And you reap what you sow, and good luck to them. I'm sure this is going to work out perfectly. And now we end the week with a different topic away from the gridiron, and I want to talk about the world of soccer/football, whichever way you want to talk about. And you know how in the SEC they always say it means more or this means more. I forget what the phrasing is, but it means more in the SEC or whatever, college football. That phrase I think we can definitely apply to soccer in South America, because That was put on display in a perfect scenario this past week when Argentina against Ecuador in an under 15s games. This is kids, 14, 15 years old. Go and find the footage. I urge you. Go just type in Argentina versus Ecuador under 15 and just see the fight that took place afterwards. Flying kicks, punches, and the pièce de resistance was one of the Ecuadorian players grabbing the corner flag and trying to use it as a spear. Now, I think we can say this because no report has come out of anyone being like seriously injured or dead, so I think we can sort of have a little bit of a chuckle at this. If it had been far worse, I wouldn't have mentioned it, but I haven't seen any reports coming out that that's happened, but so we can just give a little mention. But go and see the footage. It is incredible. And again, if you ever want to say, oh, this means, again, be it in your high school football or whatever, if you're listening, if you have a big rivalry with another high school, you say, oh, it just means more. But no, does it really mean more if you are not going to the lengths that the Argentinian and Ecuadorian players were willing to go through for that match? I don't think so. But anyway, that is it. That is the end of this latest episode. I want to thank you once again for joining in. And don't forget, you can like, subscribe, and follow us along on whatever platform podcast platform you listen to this on. And don't forget to also reach out to us on social media. We are at MRB Sports Media on Twitter, and on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, we are at Baldwin Sports Media, so give them a look as well. That is it. Thank you very much for listening. If you are new or if you're a returning member, then, as always, your patronage is very much appreciated. And all being well, I shall speak to you next week when I'm sure there will be plenty more NFL talk to dive into. So until then, take care.